it was already during a bad time in my life. I mean, I was sick and Grandma had passed away within the year. And that was my tipping point where I felt like I still kind of held everything together. But then that night happened and everything after that just started to unravel.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 72 of the Andrew Deitch podcast. What's up? Hope you guys are having a great week. Happy Tuesday. I just got back from sunny Florida on Sunday. Just getting back into the swing of things, but recorded a podcast down there. Should be coming out next week with an actually a pretty famous person. But hey, if this is your first time joining me, thank you guys so much for being here. I know there's a million other things you could be listening to right now. And the fact that my voice is hitting your eardrums is pretty miraculous if you actually think about it. It's pretty crazy. But if you didn't know, this show is all about having meaningful, unedited conversations in person with the most fascinating people that I know. And today I am so humbled to be able to bring you an amazing guest who has a very powerful and vulnerable story. So today my guest is Rachel Woods, and I met Rachel through her boyfriend, Nick Shelby, who was my guest on episode 27. Whoa, I just realized episode 7. This is episode 72. His episode was 27. Whoa. But anyways, Rachel is an aerial yoga instructor, as well as a chiropractic assistant and a world traveler. And as a child of immigrants, she has a very interesting view of the world. And on this episode, she shared some, like I said, some really powerful stuff. She shared her story of overcoming the worst time in her life. And that includes death, cancer, rape, and an eating disorder. And I don't mention that to be a bummer, and I definitely don't bring it up to, sensationalize this episode, but I did want to give you all a heads up that this episode is very intense, and the topics we discussed are very important. And it's very easy to sweep this kind of stuff under the rug and just not bring it up because, it's not fun to talk about. But I am immensely grateful that Rachel was so vulnerable with me and shared so much of her story with us. I can't stress how important this stuff is to share, and I'm really glad that I can provide an outlet for these types of conversations. And so I'm going to shut up now. Let's just jump into the episode. Please welcome my friend Rachel Woods. And we are recording.
Awesome.
I forgot to check my earphones, but I'm going to plug them in.
Is that a little sound check?
Little sound check. I can hear you, so that's good.
Good. That would be weird if you were just talking to yourself the whole time.
Yeah, that'd be a little bad.
Yeah.
And weird.
Mm-hmm.
But what's up, Rachel?
Not much. What's going on?
Nothing much. I just having a pretty chill Sunday.
Yeah,
I just realized
beautiful
this chair is
out.
like, I'm going to try to not squeak.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay.
Oh, my gosh.
It's okay. The squeaking is pretty quiet compared to our voices, so when I balance it all out, I probably won't be able to hear the squeaking. But
okay.
If you're out there hearing some squeaking, I'm sorry.
That's what it is. It's the chair, nothing else.
Very nice. But yeah, so I've been having a pretty relaxed Sunday. Just got back from Mexico.
Oh, that's right. Where were you?
In Cabo San Lucas.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yes. But this podcast will not be about me. It'll be about you.
Okay, cool. My favorite subject. No, I'm kidding.
Right? I know. I'm always talking about myself, and I'm like,
wait.
Re-listening to it, I'm like, I talk about myself all the time. Just shut up, Andrew.
Well, the podcast is named after you, so I wouldn't be surprised if you drop a little bit about you sometimes.
That is very true.
Yeah.
I am that douchey. I named my podcast after myself.
I mean, it's easy,
Yeah, and I have a weird last name.
Yeah.
So it's like, it makes sense. But anyway, so Rachel
Yes.
Woods.
Rachel Woods.
That is not a super unique name, unfortunately.
No, it's not. So I'm probably pretty hard to find.
Woods.
Yeah, it is. And what's really funny about that is my dad was he changed his last name. Huh. So he was Wojciechowski.
Wow.
Yeah, because his parents are very Polish. My entire family is very Polish. But he went into the service when he was, I think, out of college or maybe right out of high school. And in the 70s, when he went into the Marines, being Polish was not cool. Like anybody who had a last name that ended in ski or Vich or anything that could be translated as Slavic was like made fun of. They were called DPs or dumb Polacks. And so before my dad went into the military, he changed his last name from Wojciechowski to Woods. And now I'm just like, it's so cool to be different. Like, I would love to have the last name Wojciechowski, even though it'd be a pain to spell.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that's really interesting that he felt so strongly and so ashamed of it that he changed his last name.
That is actually really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, nowadays, I would not even think about making fun of someone for being Polish. Like,
Exactly.
it seems so silly.
Right? Like, I'm so proud of my Polish heritage. Like, I love the fact that my mom is from a different country and her second language was Polish, and my family still struggles through English sometimes. But back then, it wasn't cool to be different. And the same went for Irish people, people from Mexico, you know, just in general, this wasn't cool to not be American. So he changed his name to fit in better. So.
Yeah. But it's weird how, like, America's still such a new country that's a weird thing to even say.
Yeah,
like,
right?
It's not cool to be Polish, bro, but my parents are Italian immigrants.
Exactly.
Like, what does that even mean?
Right. Or at least 2 or 3 generations down the line are most likely not from this country. So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, unless you're Native American, you can't really talk.
Exactly. Which I am definitely not. I am very Polish.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, wait, so your dad came over or his parents came over?
So I think it was one generation past my grandparents on my dad's side. So my dad's from America. My grandparents are from America on that side. And I think my grandparents, my great-grandparents, is that how it is?
Yeah.
My great-grandparents are from another country, but my mom was born in Poland. So,
really? So your mom and dad are Polish, but
Yes.
they met here?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting thing. Because
Yes.
I'm always very interested in immigrant families and stuff like that because I think that it makes for very interesting people.
I think so too.
And somebody who's like daring enough or their family is daring enough to make that big of a life decision is going to be a pretty like cool person, I think.
It's really cool to hear my mom, because she came over to this country when she was, I think, 7 or 8, so she was very young. And I don't think she's 100% sure on why her family decided to come, but it's really cool to hear about her expectations of what America was, because she would have been 7, so somewhere in the early 60s. And she remembered that they said that America was literally paved with gold. So you could get rich just by going to the street and picking up the chunks of road, because she thought that it was literally paved in gold, that there was just opportunity everywhere, because they lived on a farm in Poland. And so they were dirt poor. She lived in a 1-bedroom house with her mom, her dad, her sister, and one of her older sisters passed away because the insulation in the farmhouse was so bad. So she froze to death. And so, it was just, it's nuts. But she remembers the first thing that happened when she got off of the ship. I think it was a ship. Yeah. First thing she had when she got off the ship was a creamsicle. And she had never had something that sweet before.
Wow.
Like the only thing that she'd had sweet before then was an apple. Like they didn't have, Kroger's. They didn't have Whole Foods or anything like that. She had what was grown by them. And so she now treasures creamsicles and anything creamsicle flavored, because that's the first thing she had in America.
That's really cute that she remembers that. That's cool, though, that there's like a flavor associated with America.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely... thinking about like going from Poland to America in the 60s or whatever, like you said, it's almost like jumping forward in history or something.
Exactly.
It seems like.
Yeah, at least from the town that she was in. Because, I mean, I'm sure she lived in a small town outside of Warsaw, but if she was in Warsaw, which is the capital of Poland, it might have been different. It might have been more, more
opportunities.
Exactly, more opportunities, more commercialism, whatever. But yeah, she lived on a farm where they had to take a day trip into town to get the supplies that they needed.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like...
unfathomable, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
It's super weird to like think about how humans had existed so differently all along history until now, and we live like complete aliens compared to those types of people.
Exactly. Like if I want all my groceries delivered to my house in the next hour, I click a button on my phone. I literally just tap the screen, and all the food I need for the week is delivered to my door.
It's pretty absurd to think about that.
I know it is. And to think like just one generation above me, or my mom, she grew up completely different than that.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day. They were talking about how like chunks of 10,000 years, like going back in history, like if you jumped like 10,000 years from, you know, way back in, you're like, oh, cool. Now they like invented the wheel.
Right.
Oh, that's dope. Like 10,000 years later, oh, wow, they figured out how to ride horses. Like this is crazy. And then like 10,000 years of like from now to that 10,000 years before would be the most insane jump ever.
Exactly.
Like it's like light years how much has changed. Even in the past 100 years.
Yeah.
Like it's just absurd.
Right.
But anyway, so your mom is from Poland. Your dad is Polish descent, but he wasn't born in Poland.
No.
And how did they meet?
So, let's see. My mom joined the military as well when she was 20 years old. Because I don't think that she knew of any more opportunity that could get her farther in life than that. So she joined the Air Force, and she was in the Air Force for 8 years. And she met a man there whom she later married, not my dad. So she was married before my dad. And his family lived in Toledo, Ohio, which is where I'm from. Well, they ended up not working out, which obviously was for my benefit because I wouldn't be here had their marriage been okay. And so my dad was still in Toledo, and they both worked at the post office, and they had both been recently divorced and somehow came together and were married within a year, had my sister, had me, and then boom, happy family.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So they were both military, both from Polish families, both worked at the post office, both recently divorced. So I feel like they just knew they had a lot in common.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's funny because they had all these parallel lines, but they didn't connect until then.
Exactly. And they were both, I think they were 35 when they met.
Wow.
And so I had my sister at 36, me at 38. So they definitely started our family a little later than the traditional American family does, but
that's honestly kind of cool though.
It is, yeah.
Like, because you get to have a life before all of that.
Exactly, because they didn't have any kids in their previous marriages, so
that's kind of a blessing then.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So they got to live life almost, I don't want to say selfishly, because that kind of has a negative connotation to it, but they got to live life just for them, worrying about them for the first 35 years of their life, 36 years of their life. And then they had to have me and my sister, which I don't know. I don't feel like that was an easy task.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like anytime you have kids, it's obviously like hard in the beginning, of course. Right. I wouldn't know, but I mean, obviously the blessing kind of pays off later, I feel like, rather than in the first few years, it kind of sucks a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Having to take care of a tiny human.
Yeah.
But so you came along and you lived in Toledo, Ohio.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yep.
My dad's from Ohio.
Oh, really? What part?
Yeah. He actually went to the University of Toledo.
Oh, cool.
Interestingly.
Yeah.
But he grew up in this tiny town called Van Wert.
Oh,
it's
okay.
like
I've heard of it.
Really small, yeah.
Yeah.
Very small town. I've been there. It's like Farmville.
A lot of Ohio is.
Yeah.
Just the Great Plains, flat. They grow corn and wheat there.
Yep.
It's cold.
Yeah. It's weird, like, how much Ohio is very similar to, like, the South, what you would picture the South to be.
Yeah, right, with cornfields, farmland,
and
right.
And a lot of Ohio people have, like, a Southern accent, even though it's up north.
I know a lot of people say, like, oh, I'm going to the country this weekend, when really it's just out to the middle of nowhere, and it's not really the country, but...
Yeah, it's super weird.
Yeah.
But, so you grew up in Ohio, and you lived there, like, your whole life until recently, right?
I lived in the same house until I moved to college, which I went to college at the University of Cincinnati, which is about 3 hours south of Toledo.
Yeah, definitely been through there.
Yeah,
a lot of my dad's family lives up there, so lots of driving up and down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But the nice thing is a lot of Ohio is flat, so it's just a straight shot up and a straight shot down, right down 75, no exits, anything. It
is pretty absurd how there's just like one road that you just kind of, you get on it and then your GPS is like, for 900 miles or whatever the heck it is.
No, really, I think it's from Michigan, somewhere in the UP, it will take you, 75 will take you all the way down to Florida. And the road doesn't curve, it doesn't really, veer off, it's just straight.
Yeah, kind of awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Mm-hmm. But, so kind of one of the main premises of my podcast, when I envisioned it originally, was I wanted to kind of share the backstory of how people got to where they are now. Because... it's really easy for me to be like, oh, this is Rachel. She's a yoga instructor and she's really cool and she's into like health and wellness and, all this kind of stuff. But it probably wasn't always that way. No. And there was a journey that took you there.
Exactly.
So take me through that journey as fast or slow as you want to.
Sure. So I'll first tell you where this journey's going just by introducing myself a little bit better.
That's actually a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of skipped over that.
Yeah, no worries. So my name is Rachel Woods. I'm from Toledo, Ohio, but I'm living in Marietta, Georgia right now. And I am an aerial yoga instructor, and I have been for about a year. I love doing that so much. And then for my quote-unquote real job, because apparently teaching yoga doesn't qualify as a real job for everybody, I'm also a chiropractic assistant. So both of my jobs I feel so blessed to have. I love what I do day in and day out. I typically don't get a full day off of work just because I do work those two jobs that I love so much, but I feel so blessed to do it. Anyway, so the beginning of the journey. So, have you ever read the book Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert?
I have not, but I've of course heard of it.
Yes, it's a famous book. I have it out in the living room. I'll let you borrow it on the way out.
Sure.
It's a quick read. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. But the beginning of my journey to the person that I am now kind of starts like Elizabeth Gilbert's book. So the beginning of Eat, Pray, Love is kind of almost a sad start because she talks about her divorce and how much it affected her as a person, how she lost a bunch of weight, she felt lost, something happened with her job as well, and so everything just felt like it was crumbling down. And so the first couple pages of that book, aren't super happy, super positive, but then the book grows and blossoms through her journey, and it ends up being this beautiful book with so many lessons and so many journeys. So I want to talk about the beginning of my journey, and it's not necessarily like hers, the happiest, not the happiest of starts, but like a lotus flower, which is very symbolic in yoga, it has to grow through the mud to become this beautiful blossoming flower that it is. And I know it's probably the cheesiest thing I could say as a yoga instructor, making a reference to the lotus, but there's a reason that we talk about it and we use it so symbolically.
Yeah.
So the beginning of my journey to the person I am now started when I was about to turn 19. It was after my freshman year in college. It was the day of my last final exam, and I came home and my grandmother passed away that night. And, grandparents pass away. I mean, it's not normal for them to outlive you, especially since she was 88 and I was 18. So She was sick, she had a heart issue, and she had all of my life. So she passed away that night, and it was the first time that I ever lost somebody that was close to me. Like, I had people in my life that passed away, but it was like, this was my grandmother. It was my first family member I lost.
On your mom's side?
No, my dad's side.
On your dad's side.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
So it was my dad's mom, and it was very hard. I saw him and his siblings really going through it because, she was the caretaker, the matriarch of their family. So it hit me hard because, when I would come home, we'd be going to Grandma and Jaja's. Jaja is the Polish way of saying grandpa. So now it's like, we're not going to Grandma and Jaja's anymore. We're just going to Jaja's. So it was a big shift. It was a very hard thing to happen.
And she lived close to you guys?
Yeah, within 15 minutes of us. And she babysat us growing up. She wasn't much of a cook, but she always made this chocolate pudding. I don't know why I remember that. But anyway, so she passed away, and it was hard on everybody. And so that was kind of the start of a hard year for me. So there's a start, and then there's kind of a tipping point in this year as well. But I'll take you through all of it.
In college, where you said you were at the University of Cincinnati?
Correct.
And what were you studying at the time?
Communications and public relations. Or actually, freshman year, I was studying dietetics, but then I quickly realized I was bad at science. So I switched to something I was good at, and that was communications, public relations. And that's what I ended up getting my degree in.
Very nice.
Yes. So.
And I was going to say, so your mom went into like the Air Force and all this stuff. Was there a like big push for you to go to college from them at all, from your parents, or like
no,
not really? It was just what you wanted to do? Yeah,
and it's funny because I've been asked that question before as well, because my dad I think he started college, but he never graduated. My mom never went to college, and so everyone's like, oh my gosh, first generation, that's so huge. And I was like, no, it was always something that I was supposed to do. Like, it never felt forced and never felt pressured. It was just like, you graduate high school and I'm going to go to college.
Yeah,
it was just
that's what everyone kind of does.
It was a natural progression for me.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
because a lot of parents that don't go to college, like, they have this huge... It comes from both sides. Like, if both parents don't go to college, then they're like, we want you to really do this, blah, 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 it means so much, I wish I could have. And then both parents that did go to college are like, it was such a big part of our lives, we want you to do it too.
Right, yeah.
So it can go both ways. But that's kind of interesting that there wasn't really that push.
No,
or that,
no,
pressure.
there wasn't. I think it's because my parents worked for the post office, and technically that's a government job.
Yeah, of course.
So they had government benefits. They both had military background. Yeah, pensions, 401k, the whole nine.
Yeah.
So they didn't struggle as much with those jobs. I'm sure they struggled at some point, but at least when I came around 38 years in, they weren't struggling. Yeah. So there was never a push. You could do whatever you want. Yeah.
That's kind of cool. And I feel like also when you're an older parent, I guess, obviously 38's not like the oldest parent in the world by any means.
Not.
But it's not 21 or 19 or something.
No, one of my best friends growing up, her mom had her at 19. And so when my mom would drop me off at her house, it was like her talking to a teenager is what it felt like. Well, but she was in her mid-20s, but my mom was in her mid-40s. Yeah. So it was different.
Yeah, it's different. And I think also when you're kind of, like I said, an older parent, you already have that life experience where you kind of know, I don't know, you're like, okay, they'll figure it out, rather than a 21-year-old that's still kind of figuring it out.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm 23 right now. I can't imagine bringing a child into this world. Like you said, I'm just figuring it out as I go, day to day sometimes. So
Exactly. Yeah. And the weird thing is you realize more and more when you get older that everyone's still kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
Even
you look
old
up to
people.
these people and you realize oh my gosh, they're still figuring it out too. I'm not the only one who's struggling sometimes.
Yeah, you just get better at faking it and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So
but anyway, so you're in college studying communications, last day of final exam, and your grandma passed away.
Yeah, and so that was the summer of freshman year, and it was hard. I was home, so that was nice. I was around my family and all that. And then midway through that summer, I started having some weird health issues. And I'm sorry if you're a male listening to this podcast, but it was female issues. So I was having some weird things happen with my period. So I went to a gynecologist, and this was down in Cincinnati, and I had a weird test result come back, and it was from a pap. So I went and I had some more tests done. And long story short, I was diagnosed with something called cervical dysplasia. And cervical dysplasia basically just means that I had I was precancerous in my cervix.
Wow.
And that was at age 19. So the traditional way, I shouldn't say traditional, but one of the main ways that cervical dysplasia happens is from HPV, so the human papilloma virus. I don't even know if I said that right, but
that sounded right.
I think that's what it was. So they tested me for HPV, and I didn't have that. So basically, I got this precancerous condition, and they had no cause. The doctors couldn't tell me.
You were never contracted with HPV.
Exactly. Huh. So they didn't know what caused it.
And precancerous, does that mean that there's a tumor or something there? Or what does precancerous exactly mean in that case?
So on the cervix, there was an overabundance of cells that were growing, and they weren't healthy cells. They weren't positive cells. And I guess that's the best way I can describe it. And so if the cell growth continued the way that it had, or it was growing, it would be full-blown cervical cancer. And so this was, so my grandma died at the beginning of May, and this happened in October of that year.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's, it was about 5 or 6 months later.
Yeah, but in that moment, it seems grandma, it seemed very recent, of course.
Yeah, and I'll get to it, but there's more that happened that year. So I call this the dark times, but yeah, like I said, we're going to get through this. It's not going to be a very sad, depressing story.
It's okay.
Yeah. So I had this diagnosis of cervical dysplasia, and I'm 19. There's no cancer in my family. I was not expecting this diagnosis. I just went for a routine pap after, some weird periods. And then all of a sudden, boom, C word, which is the worst word that anyone can hear at any age. So I immediately was put on 2 drugs. One that I don't really know. I can't really explain what it was for, but it was something having to do with slowing down the cancer. And then they put me on birth control as well, which I wasn't previously on. That was to regulate those irregular periods. Yeah. But then, like most things, the drugs were giving me side effects. So side effects like constipation, nausea. I couldn't fall asleep, and then I couldn't wake up in the morning. And so when I went back to my doctor and I said, hey, these are my side effects, instead of changing the dose or giving me different advice, he gave me more drugs. And so we know that more drugs doesn't always lead to more health. And in my case, that's what happened. I had less health. So my hair started to fall out. And so I had to dye it brown. And if you look on my Instagram or anything, I am blonde, like bright blonde, blue eyes. And all of a sudden I could see my head through my hair. And I was like, holy moly, I need to do this. So I started dyeing my hair brown, which was like almost like an identity change for me.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It was very strange. And, you know, I don't blame them, but my roommates at the time almost didn't know what to do with me because they were living their best life. They were in their second year of college. They had boyfriends and other friends and parties and sororities and all these other things going on. And so I'm the sick girl moping at home trying to get through the semester. And so I didn't have a lot of support from them. And I don't blame them looking back. At the time, I did blame them, but
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I was sick, so you know, I have to kind of be easy on myself. So then there was this other big event that happened, and this was in December of that year. And I just want to preface this with a trigger warning that it will talk about sexual assault. And so if you are sensitive to that, then just skip. Skippers are welcomed at this time if this is a subject that's sensitive to you. So when my diagnosis happened, I still try to carry on life like normal. And a friend of mine hooked me up with this guy who was new to the university. And it seemed like a good fit at first. He was friends with her boyfriend. And so we would double and hang out and go to these parties together. But it was like trying to fit two puzzle pieces that weren't cut out for each other next to each other. Like it was like an almost fit, but it wasn't quite there. You know what I mean? And like I could feel it. I knew that it wasn't a perfect fit, but it was like I was sick and I was lonely. So I was willing to do anything at that point just to, you know, kind of fill that void. And so this guy ended up kind of being a drunk. I mean, he was in a frat, which I guess not all frat boys are drunks, but you know, this one happened to be that way. And so in December of 2013, I was living in this really great apartment with those 3 roommates that I mentioned earlier. And it was above this strip of really cool bars. And I was 19, so I couldn't go out. I couldn't, you know, drink. I had a fake, but I didn't use it on Tuesday nights. Well, this guy did. And when he was at the bars that were below my apartment on this Tuesday night, he texted me. And he was like, hey, can I just come crash at your place? Because I don't want to walk all the way home. It's December in Cincinnati, which means it was probably all of 10 degrees. And so at that time, I didn't realize like how drunk he was. And so I said, sure, absolutely, come crash at my place. And I won't get into any details because, you know, that's something that does not need to be shared. But he came in and he reeked of tequila and Four Locos. Just absolutely reeked. Like I could smell it on his skin. It was so bad. Ugh. And it was one of those situations where I was sober. He was trashed out of his mind. And no meant nothing to him. No did not mean no. It could have, it didn't register. And so he ended up raping me that night. And it was already during a bad time in my life. I mean, I was sick and Grandma had passed away within the year. And that was my tipping point where I felt like I still kind of held everything together. But then that night happened in December and everything after that just started to unravel. And the worst part was nobody believed me. And that is a very, very common thing with sexual assault and rape, that people, the women or whomever is the victim of this crime, they're not heard properly. And for whatever reason, my roommates, because they had met him before, we were quote unquote talking, we had hung out before, they just thought maybe him and I were having a fight or something like that. But rape is rape, and you should never victim shame. You should never question the victim until you get all of the details. And even then, just try to sympathize with them, because if they have the courage to come up to you and say, this terrible thing happened to me, don't be like, oh, well, I don't know, because no, like they're confiding in you. They probably need your support. They probably need your love, whatever it is. And so don't dismiss it. That's because that's what I needed. I needed some support for the people that I did confide in. I needed love, and I didn't get that. And so I feel like if I had gotten that, maybe I wouldn't have, spiraled so much. So yeah, sorry, that got really heavy really fast.
No, it's actually like, it's a very relevant subject, of course,
Yeah, of course.
I mean, and I don't want to make it seem like, okay, yeah, we're in this time where we're talking about sexual assault so much that, blah, blah, blah. This is just part of the thing. Like, I think we tend to look at, like, there's so much sexual assault. Like, there just is.
Yeah.
And so we a lot of times just want to blanket over and bubble everything into one thing.
Yeah.
And gloss over it like, oh, well, I've heard this and I've heard that.
Exactly. Instead
of, like, looking at it on a case-by-case. Because when you look at it on a case-by-case, that's very time-consuming. It's very emotional. It's very stressful, like, to go through with a fine-tooth comb and, like, okay, so, blah, blah, blah. And so people do want to be like, are you sure? Are you,
Exactly. Like, for some reason, they feel like they need to have all the details or have the explanation of it. Mm-hmm. When they don't need any of that. Yeah. And
I mean, and I've been guilty of having that mentality as well.
Oh yeah, everyone has. A lot of people have, and I don't blame them.
And the problem is, as well, is like you said, you should never blame the victim. There's like this whole thing of victim blaming that happens when someone comes out. And a lot of times I think it's because people feel like, well, I've had a similar thing happen and I didn't come out with it, so
exactly,
I wasn't heard about this, so your thing is not valid either, or whatever. Because there is, like, levels to things that happen, all the way from, like, catcalling to full-blown rape. And sometimes people want to bubble that all into one thing, and it's just not.
That's why, the word rape for me isn't easy to say, but
of course.
I didn't want to say he sexually assaulted me. Even though it does fall under that umbrella term of sexual assault, I want people to know that he raped me. That there is a difference.
There definitely is. Yeah, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. And that is important to distinguish as well. Yeah. I'm glad that you said that, because sexual assault could be flashing yourself to somebody or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Or that could be categorized as sexual harassment. Mm-hmm. So there's different levels to it. And if you don't, if all of this is lost on you, then don't feel bad. There are resources. The Google machine is a great tool for educating yourself, at least on most aspects. Don't go on WebMD like I did. But if you have questions about the difference between rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, they are similar, but they are different as well. So educate yourself, because you might be in a situation someday where a friend confides in you and says, I was sexually harassed. And you might think, hey, that means that they were raped. You might go punch the guy in the throat. But while, it's not a good thing either way, it wasn't full rape. So you just gotta educate yourself for the world that we live in.
Yeah, that's really balanced perspective. And I think also we live in, like, these sound bites and we live in these headlines, and I think a platform like this is a perfect place to talk about stuff like this, because people can hear the whole thing. And also, I think it's important to share this kind of stuff in long form.
I do too.
Because if you're not talking, it's a hard thing to just, like, sum up in a little article and hopefully someone reads it or whatever. Exactly. I think podcasts are, like, the best place to talk about stuff like this.
Me too, especially in our busy day-to-day commutes that we have, or long commutes like we have in Atlanta. Yeah. I listen to podcasts all day long.
Me too.
All day long. I have it playing in my car and then on my headphones and then when I'm grocery shopping. So I think it's just a very easy way to reach people.
Exactly. So. And that's another thing, is I think also a lot of my audience, as best as I can break it down, it's like 60% male, 40% women. So there are a lot of women listening to this podcast. But I think as a guy, it's hard to jump into the sexual assault, sexual harassment,
it's hard
rape,
to say sometimes, right?
Yeah, like rape conversation, because a lot of times people want to invalidate your opinion because you're a male, or people want to say, well, you'll never understand, or you're a cisgender white male, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
So your opinion doesn't matter, so just stay out of this conversation.
You'll never understand what we're going through.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Rape does happen to men as well. So I'm sorry, I hope we haven't lost that 60% of the male listeners that you
I honestly
have.
think that it, like, for me personally, it's an interesting subject, not in the fact of, like, oh, this is so fascinating that this happened, but it's interesting because you don't always get to hear it straight from
the horse's mouth.
Yeah, straight from the horse's mouth. You don't always get to hear it in detail. And so I think it's important for people to listen. I don't think men that are listening to this would be lost on it, because I think it is important to hear.
Yeah.
But anyways, not to get too wrapped up in, like, the psychology of how we're talking about this, but So you were raped.
Yes.
And you said that your friends were not super supportive. And
No, so it's not what I expected to happen either. So I didn't tell my family for a very long time, a very, very long time, because I knew that they would go all the way with it. They would, contact the school, the fraternity that he belonged to, XYZ, and go that route. So I didn't want anything to happen yet because I wasn't ready for people to know. So I reached out to my roommates first. As soon as he left, actually. I didn't even think about that. I told my roommates, and I told the friend that had hooked us up. And they were just kind of like, oh, are you sure? Like, I don't know. That doesn't sound like something he would do. Like, are you sure you guys aren't just going through something? Have you talked to him? And it was very much like, do you not hear what I just said? Like, he forced himself on me, and he raped me. Yeah. And again, it was very much like, okay, well, maybe just think about it. Maybe that's not really what happened. Maybe you're just having a hard time because these other things that are going on with your life. And while I did have a lot of things going on in my life, I know what happened. Again, I hadn't had a sip of alcohol that night. Yeah,
that's kind of a rare situation. I was actually thinking that it's kind of rare that you were the sober one and he was coming and drunk.
Exactly.
I mean, not rare in the sense of not necessarily, but a lot of times. You hear like, oh, well, you were drunk. You were both drunk. Are you sure? Like, do you remember it right? But you were stone cold sober.
Right. And so I shouldn't say funny, but the situation was that he doesn't really remember anything. Yeah. And so normally that's
probably not.
Yeah. No. His skin reeked of tequila so much so that I don't drink tequila. I don't drink margaritas at all. I can't be around it. A lot of my friends are like, oh my God, let's go get margs. It's kind of like a fun, girly thing to do. I can't taste it. I can't be around the smell of it. But anyway, I knew clear and well what was going on. And I don't think he did, but he still made the choice that he did. And so I won't water it down because of his drunkenness.
Of course not. I've heard it said, well, he was drunk. He didn't know what he was doing. But it's like, that's not a valid excuse for any other crime that's committed. It's not an excuse for crashing your car into someone and killing them.
Yeah, exactly. So why should it be watered down
he didn't know
and
what he was
taken
doing.
lightly?
He was drunk. He grabbed the keys. He just drove away.
He's just like a reflux, like a reflux. Yeah, he's just like going home from the bar like he always does. He just had one too many this time. Yeah. No, it doesn't excuse anything. Muscle memory is not an excuse. Of course not. In any way. Just because we had done it before is not an excuse. And I think that was a hard thing for my friends to hear, or a hard concept for them to get over. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't a guy grabbed me off of the street.
Yep. Because that's what you picture. You picture like a girl jogging through the woods and like a rapist like runs out of the bushes and
she was targeted, and it was a very calculated, planned out event. When that's not what happens in a majority. I don't have the statistic, but a majority of them happen by somebody that you know. Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's such a hard subject, because a lot of times it might be the boyfriend, or it might be even the husband, or the...
Exactly. Marital rape is a thing as well.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. Because, I mean, just to define it for people, rape would be any time that someone is forcing them upon you sexually when you're not consenting and you don't want it, right? Yeah. So even if you have had sex before with that person and it wasn't rape, it could be rape later.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like a hard thing for people to realize too.
Right, non-consensual. And there's certain definitions of rape that vary. Some say it's just penetration. Some people think oral can count as well, forcible oral. But yeah, it's ugly any way that it's defined. And it's not okay. It's not acceptable in any form that it happens. But anyway, if you need more information or more resources, then reach out to Andrew or I, and we are happy to explain more. Or if this is something that you've dealt with in your life, then please feel free to reach out to me, because I know what you're going through. So email, text, get my number from Andrew. You're not alone. You have resources and you can get through it. I promise. It might take years, but you can get through it. But
that's really powerful.
Yeah. Let's moving on.
Yes, let's move on from this. But it's super important, of course. But anyway, so that happened. Your roommates were not supportive. Did anyone really support you said you hadn't told your parents or family or anything?
Yeah, I didn't tell my parents. I honestly don't think I will ever tell my dad because he is an ex-Marine. So I don't ever see him listening to this podcast because he's in his 60s. So that's one of the reasons I'm okay with expressing it here. Yeah. My mom knows. I told my sister, and she was the first person to believe me. So that was powerful. She wanted to castrate him. She wanted to do all the things, big sisters are compelled to do when they hear things like that. So that was the first time I felt supported in that situation. But after that happened, I felt more alone than ever because, again, you go to your friends, the friends that, you think love and support you. And then when something like this happens and they don't, I felt more alone than ever. So after that, I don't know exactly how this happened or why it started, but I had an eating disorder afterwards. And I think it's because, I felt so out of control that what I put into my body was one of the few things that I did have control of. I use the app, and I'm not trying to bash the app in any way, but I use the app MyFitnessPal, which helps a lot of people on their fitness goals and journeys and their weight loss journeys. But for me, I used it to measure every ounce that I put in my body. I literally knew the caloric value of a tablespoon of jelly if I was using it. And I used it to lose weight as rapidly as possible when I didn't need to lose weight.
Were you using it as what is the absolute minimum caloric amount I can survive on without,
dying?
Yeah, without dying.
Actually having my organs shut down and everything. Wow. So
that's crazy.
It was terrible. And I got the idea, honestly, from Instagram because at that point, Instagram, fitness models were a huge thing. And so all of them were talking about tracking your macros and seeing how many calories you were intaking and blah, blah, blah. So I went down the rabbit hole and took it to the next level where I was eating 800 calories a day, no carbs. It was literally an all protein diet because that's what all the fitness models did. Yeah. And it was terrible. You can't live on chicken breast and protein powder like I thought I could. Yeah.
Man cannot live on chicken alone.
No, it was literally just chicken. I would not eat an apple because it had too many carbs. Yeah, but again, now looking back, it was the one thing that I could control in my life, and so that's why it went down that journey.
I've never thought about someone abusing MyFitnessPal before, but that makes a lot of sense.
And I don't think I'm alone in that. Because,
you're probably not. No, you're 100% not.
Because you can control the amount. My goal for the day was 800, and there was never a thing that said this is 800 too
calories?
Low. 800 calories.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and I was active. I was lifting. I was going to class. So it was terrible.
Wow.
Yeah, and when you starve yourself, you start to become an angry person. I can tell you, I was angry.
Person.
I was a hangry person. All I could think about all day long were carbs. I wanted rice. I wanted pasta. I wanted bread. Wow. But I forbid myself from consuming those because of the calories in them, the carbs in them, really.
Wow. And at this point, you were still taking all the meds for your precancerous.
Yep. And I was going for monthly visits for that as well. And needless to say, because of the stress of the rape and then the stress on my body from not eating, I wasn't getting healthier.
Of course not.
No, of course. Why would I? I wasn't creating the vitality needed to become healthier. I wasn't eating vegetables. I wasn't getting rest. I wasn't drinking enough water. I wasn't getting sunlight. I was focused on losing weight that I didn't need to lose. And
literally kind of on death's door, to be honest, because it's you were eating such little food as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I was getting biopsies all the time to monitor the status of the cancer.
At any point, during your doctor's visits, were they asking you about your diet or anything like that?
So I don't want to bash my doctor, but my gynecologist, which was the one who's prescribing the drugs, and he was the one taking care, course of my care. He would have put me on more drugs and more drugs and more drugs if he could.
But honestly, that's probably not it wasn't that's exclusive to just that doctor.
No,
it's kind of
not.
The norm.
But it's not all doctors either. I don't want to say all medical doctors, all gynecologists, or anybody with doctor in front of their name has the intent to harm or just make money off of people. That's not what I'm saying at all.
No. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to put those words in your mouth anyways, but I was just curious because I feel like it is a pretty common thing that doctors a lot of times don't necessarily ask about your diet, don't ask about a lot of these things that are probably indicators of what's actually causing the root problem, but
yeah. Or he didn't probe, he probably asked, a light question, are you eating fruits and vegetables? Yeah, that was it. Not like put me on a meal plan, make sure I'm eating enough, make sure I'm eating the right things, make sure I'm supplementing well, sleeping well, all the other things that besides drugs could have helped me get better.
Yeah. On a little rabbit trail for a second, I heard about, I think it's in Sweden or something, they were part of like health insurance. What they were doing was putting people on like meal plans, going into people's houses and like going through their pantry and throwing away like all the bad food and stuff like that.
That was
and,
on
like,
insurance, you
their
said?
insurance was actually covering like personal training,
oh my gosh,
meal plans, pantry raids, like all this kind of stuff, because they had realized they'd done tests.
Yeah.
Because, and also put them in touch with, it wasn't like, it was weird. It was, they called it, I think, it was like counseling, but what they would do is a lot of times they would attach like an emotion with the results, because a lot of times like the doctor saying like you're gonna get fat and die, like people are like, yeah, I know, I've heard that my whole life,
right? Yeah,
but they would, in the counseling, they would be like, okay, they would take them down the steps of what's gonna actually happen to your body if you continue this way, like, and find the emotion, like, oh, you like hanging out with your grandkids, well, guess what's gonna happen? Like, you're gonna get fat, and then you're gonna have to like be in a wheelchair, and you're not gonna be able to play with your grandkids, and then your grandkids are gonna see you deteriorate, and you're gonna die, and you're gonna like blah, 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 blah.
Put the stress on them almost,
exactly.
too. Right.
And they would attach like an emotion with the results rather than just like, you're going to get fat and die. It's like, yeah, I know. Or like, cigarettes are going to kill you. Like, yeah, I know.
And they didn't really paint the picture well enough.
Exactly. And so they would do this like future, I forget what they called it. It was like future projection or something like that. And they realized that in the insurance, like investing the money up front for preventative, all this stuff, they realized that they could save tons of money down the road in medical expenses because they weren't getting diabetic. They weren't
having heart disease.
Yeah, they weren't having heart disease. They weren't having to spend tons of money on medication.
They weren't getting cancer. Yeah,
it's absurd actually
to
think that, and you think like, oh my gosh, the insurance was paying for all that stuff up front, but really, it's not that expensive. Like to pay for like personal trainer, meal plan, and a counselor like once a month or whatever it was.
Exactly.
To prevent like tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars down the road. It's pretty absurd.
You know what's funny? There's actually something that my boss, my doc, Dr. Ronnie, he puts it in this presentation, a health presentation that we give to all the patients that come into the office. And it's a quote, or it's a part of the Medicare guidelines. And I don't remember the number of it or where you can find it. But it says Medicare does not cover or does not provide for anything that concerns itself with the prevention of disease or the promotion of health. And so it says that in Medicare guidelines, which anyone 65 and older in the United States has Medicare. And it literally says that they don't concern themselves with the prevention of disease or the promotion of health. They basically are there if you get sick and if you're dying.
They literally say the promotion of health?
Yes.
That's absurd.
Yeah, so chiropractic is considered the promotion of health, or physical training is the promotion of health, eating healthy. All those things that you do to try and be proactive about it, Medicare won't cover, but they will cover if you're sick and dying, basically. So we have a system that, I think Nick talked about this in his podcast. We don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system where they take care of you if you're already sick and dying, but how do we get you to where you're not at that point? How do we get to the prevention of disease instead of just the treatment or the covering up of the symptoms?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to go back to your story.
Yes.
So sorry for taking us down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But
we're getting to the end. I promise. It's the saddest parts are over.
No, this is a really interesting story. I didn't even know that you had such an awesome story. But anyways, so like you said, the lotus flower must emerge from the mud.
Exactly. So we're getting to that part.
So what happened?
So then once the eating disorder had been full blown, this was January of 2014.
How low of weight were you at that point? I mean, not to make it about numbers, but I healthily hang out because I'm 5'3". I healthily hang out around 130, maybe a little bit less. I have a lot of muscle on my frame, but I think my lowest was like 102. Wow.
Yeah, which my goal was to be under 100 pounds. Wow. And that's, for me, and the way that my body is, under 100 pounds was not healthy at all. Like,
of course.
My roommates actually did come up to me at one point because I posted a picture on Instagram, and I still have it up on Instagram just to kind of remember my journey. You can see all of my ribs in it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, like it's like Skeletor. It's terrible. And so they came up to me and they were like, "We noticed you don't eat very much, and then we saw this picture of you and you're acting like all this way. What's going on? We want to help you."
Wow, that's cool.
No, it was very cool. It was a little late though. I had so many drugs in my system, and I had all of these emotions happening from everything that happened in the last year that I was just like rejecting them. I was like, I'm fine. I'm healthy. I'm doing everything I can for myself. I'm doing this alone. Like I was very much like, I don't need your help anymore. And I don't know if it was bitterness because of what happened in December. Like I didn't want their help later. I needed it before then.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
what was the time frame between the rape and this point when they confronted you about?
So the rape happened finals week, December. And because it was college, I remember things in semester chunks.
Yeah.
So it was finals week, December of 2013. And then this was either January or February of 2014. Because I just dropped weight like really fast.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was quick, but now we're getting to the happier part of the story.
Yeah.
So now all of the crap is out. You know my skeletons, my deepest, darkest secrets, and I only share them so I hope maybe it resonates with somebody and I can help them on their journey. That's the only reason I'm sharing this today, that if you are experiencing anything, or if you know anybody experiencing something like I have, then if you need help reaching out to them, or if you need help for you, reach out to me. I'm here for you. Anyway, so there were a couple of things that happened in the next year that helped me get out of this dark hole. And the first one was I had a German minor at the time, or I was on track to have a German minor, didn't have it yet. And in one of my classes, they mentioned that they were doing a study abroad program in Germany. And it was one of those moments where I don't know why I did it so quickly, but I went up to the teacher and I signed up. Just afterwards, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go. And she was like, well, do you have to, plan or do anything? Because I had a job at the time. And I was like, nope, I'm just going to go. And I didn't even know all the details about it, but it was just something compelled me to sign up for it immediately.
That's the most important part about like going on a trip though, is like somehow making it like solid, like I'm going. And then figure out the details later.
Exactly. So details just didn't matter, which was so funny because at the time I was a control freak with everything in my life, especially my weight, like we talked about. But for some reason, this was like very spontaneous, which was out of character at the time. So
that's cool.
So after that semester, which was May of 2014, I traveled to Germany for 9 weeks. And,
what part?
So I was studying in Munich. I was at Ludwig Maximilian Universität, which was in Munich, Germany, and it was Bavaria, the summer, and it was beautiful. Oh my gosh, it was beautiful. My German was terrible, but luckily, I don't know if you've ever been to Germany. Yeah. I think you have. Yeah. They all speak English for the most part.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Everywhere you go, you don't have to muddle your way through a conversation. People are going to understand what you're saying in English. So it was wonderful. But the best part was I didn't have cell service. So guess what I couldn't use?
My Fitness Pal.
I couldn't use my Fitness Pal anymore.
Wow.
And so I had to...
Did you try to get on it, like on Wi-Fi and stuff?
I did. When I was in cafes, I would try to download whatever I was eating, but, it was very far and few between. And when you have an international phone... And I couldn't track it consistently anymore.
Interesting.
And when we were studying abroad, and I don't know if anyone else out there listening has studied abroad before, especially in Germany, you drink a lot.
Yep.
And I was there during the 2014 World Cup, which was the year that Germany won the World Cup. And so we had viewing parties, and it was...
That's incredible.
I drank a lot, and honestly, it helped me gain the weight back that I needed. And obviously, that wasn't the healthiest way to gain the weight back, not by any means, but I started to gain weight again. And in the book, Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert, she goes through a similar thing where she loses a lot of weight because of depression that she suffered prior or after her divorce. And when she went to Italy, she ate a lot of pasta, drank a lot of wine. She gained weight very quickly, but she didn't think about it like gaining weight. She thought about it as gaining herself back.
Yeah.
Because when you lose weight that you don't need to, especially when it's because of an emotional thing that might have happened, you lose yourself. And so I went to Germany and gained beer weight and gained myself back as well. And when I came back to America in July, I stopped using my Fitness Pal. Just because I wasn't used to it anymore. I'd kind of broken that routine. And so I started getting healthier again, which was good. But I still had the cervical dysplasia, and I still was on those drugs and all of that. So that wasn't taken care of. But one of those things
did you have to bring a bunch of medicine over?
Which was fun. I had to get my doctor to sign off on it because they had to give me a 90-day supply of all of my drugs, which normally they give you a 30-day. So it was really tough to do because, I mean, any of those were lethal in a 90-day supply. But I had to prove that I was studying abroad and I was doing this. But yeah, I had to take everything over with me.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I had to go to the hospital actually twice while I was over there because I think I had forgotten to take one of the drugs and my condition wasn't better. So I had to go to the hospital in Germany twice, and it was terrifying to try to explain to them. They didn't have any medical records.
Ooh,
yeah. So
that's kind of terrifying.
Krankenhaus, or Krankhaus is the way you say a hospital in German. Literally the broken house or sick house.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had to go to
sick house.
Yeah, German hospital. Oh. But it was an adventure. But anyway, I got back to America in July, having not beaten, but I had gotten over the hardest part of my eating disorder.
Yeah.
And I gained weight again, and I kind of forgot about my fitness pal, which was awesome.
And you said, and you were like exercising at that point. Were you doing like tons of cardio, or were you like lifting, or what were you doing?
I was lifting, so because that's what all the fitness models were doing. They were all squatting and doing overhead presses.
That's kind of good though.
And I'm not trying to, say anything bad about fitness models. I think that they're wonderful. They motivate a lot of people. But for me, I took it to the extreme. So it wasn't healthy the way I did it. They do it right. Just want to say that.
Yeah, of course.
I don't want to bash anybody.
And I'm sure there's great Instagram fitness models, and there's definitely some bad actors out there too.
Yes, exactly. People who should have no place giving diet plans to anybody.
Yeah.
So be careful if you do that. If you do get a diet plan from somebody or a fitness plan from anybody, just do your research on them. Make sure it's not just their own concoction that works for them, because it might not be healthy for you.
That's probably very, very good advice.
Yeah. But anyway, so the next step on my healing journey, when I came back in July, I reconnected with a guy named Nick, who I think you know him pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nick and I, we were kind of together my freshman year of college, but then he moved down here to Marietta sophomore year. And so we decided, we're not going to date. We're not going to do the whole long distance thing.
Yeah.
But we had always kind of kept in contact. He knew generally what was going on with me as far as sickness and all of that. And he did his best to, stay a good friend over the distance.
Yeah.
But in July, when I got back to America, he was in town and he took me to dinner, just like we always had, because we were friends. But we'd always been a little bit more than friends too. Mm-hmm. And we went to dinner at a place called the Yard House, and something just clicked again. And we were like, okay, why aren't we doing this? I know we're long distance, but just why aren't we doing this? And so we ended up dating, and obviously we are still together today, almost 4 years later. And, having listened to Nick's episode, if you guys haven't already, go ahead and listen to it. Nick has a very radical view on health, not radical in a bad way, just different than what most people use the term health as.
Radical, dude.
Yeah, not like that. That's not radical isn't the right word.
No, I agree. It's like extreme in a good way. Like yes, it's extreme. It's very polarizing in the sense of like he knows exactly what he believes, and like whether you agree or not, like that's what exactly. So he introduced a lot of things to me, the most important of which is chiropractic. Wow.
And so his dad is also a chiropractor. And as soon as we started dating, I was talking about my back pain because in high school I'd broken my back from cheerleading. So I'd always just had, a sore lower back. And at the time, that's all I thought chiropractic can help me with. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go start seeing your dad. And then his dad explained to me that chiropractic does more than just fix back pain. And I was like, what the heck? What do you mean? And he started talking to me about the nervous system, how the nervous system controls everything. So do you know what your nervous system is comprised of? Your brain and your spinal cord.
Yeah.
And so
I was like, I thought at first you meant like the actual tissue. I'm like, cells? I'm like, I don't know.
No.
Yeah, your nervous system. Yes, I got you now.
Yes,
brain and spinal cord.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Exactly. So the nervous system controls everything in your body. And sometimes there can be interference in your nervous system, mainly a spinal bone putting pressure on a nerve. And so that causes dysfunction in the body, no communication from the brain to the body. And I'm making this a very condensed version. There's more to this, but I'm making it very condensed.
Like, you really actually should, if you're interested in this stuff, definitely go listen to the episode I did with Nick, because we went into very, very good detail about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. This is what I do now for a living, is I explain this to people. Yeah. But anyway, we'll get to that. There can be interference in your nervous system. It puts pressure on your spinal nerves. Your body doesn't communicate to your brain and vice versa anymore, which causes sickness, disease, and dysfunction to happen. So, again, I didn't know any of this until I went to go see his dad. And I started going to see him regularly. Again, I went for back pain. And he started asking me about my other conditions. And so I told him about the cervical dysplasia. I told him I couldn't sleep. Told him I was constipated. I told him XYZ. And he was like, okay. And within 6 weeks of going, everything started changing in my health.
Wow.
So I was starting to wane off of all of my daily medications because I didn't have constipation anymore, so I didn't need that medication. I started sleeping better, so I didn't need that medication. And then slowly but surely, I was waned off of everything except for the birth control. And that was, It took 6 months for it to fully go away. But the cervical dysplasia was gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And that was...
when you went to your gynecologist, like, what was their reactions? Like, was there any kind of, like...
So it's funny, whenever he had a serious talk with me, he took me out of the exam room, which is, you've never been to a gynecologist, but it's a terrible room where you lay down and there's these stirrups that you put your feet in, and it's a very uncomfortable, sterile room. But whenever he wanted to have a really powerful conversation with me, he would take me to his office, and it was this big oak desk, and he was almost sitting up higher than me, and I always felt like he was talking down to me whenever he was telling me things. And this was the same room that he told me I had cervical dysplasia in, so it was not a place that I was fond of, a place that I was fond of going to. But he sat me down in there, and he said, the results from your last pap smear came in. And I was like, oh, okay, well, now what is this going to tell me? And he said, we found no traces of cervical dysplasia. Wow. And so for him, I think he thought the medicine had worked. And I'm not saying it didn't. I don't want to make any claims either way, but all I know is that it was gone.
That's amazing.
And it still is gone. It's not something that came back. And eventually I even got off of the birth control. So I am completely drug-free now. I've had no, I don't know if relapse is the right word. I have had no, the condition has never come up again in my life.
I was going to say, like, okay, so a lot of women are on birth control. And I am very unfamiliar with this subject because I have a brother and no sisters, and my mom has never been very, like...
open about that?
Not necessarily that she wouldn't be, but she's kind of just like, there's no reason to, like, talk about that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's never been brought up. It's not like it was a dinner time subject.
Yeah, right.
But I've heard it in recent years being brought up, like, a ton more in the general, public eye of birth control, and, like, obviously people are trying to defund Planned Parenthood, which is, people are saying it's not just about going and getting an abortion, it's also about a place where you can get birth control for free and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But then I listen to a lot of podcasts as well, like you said, and, like, I've heard recently, I forget, I'm gonna have to link it. It was this doctor, and she used to be in, like, I don't even know how you would say it, just, like, general medical field, and now she's more of in, like, holistic medicine. And one thing that she was talking about was birth control, which was very fascinating to me because I don't like have very much experience in like what it actually does.
Sure.
I was always thinking, like, oh yeah, birth control, that's what you take when you're, like, having sex with your boyfriend and you don't want to get pregnant.
Exactly right. You're not ready for a baby yet, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the name implies.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're trying to control the birth.
Right.
And so, but I mean, what I didn't realize until probably a few years ago or whatever is that a lot of girls are prescribed birth control to, like, regulate their period or do all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah.
And but I was listening to this so I just was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, birth control is, like, a normal thing. It helps you, like, control your body. But then, like, listening to this other doctor, to be honest, I can't even express exactly what it was that she was talking about or what I heard. But heard about it in a different light,
Yeah.
in like kind of a negative light, in the sense of it kind of like puts your hormones all out of whack and like kind of throws everything off.
Well, your hormones are now being fed a synthetic source instead of a natural source. So it's blocking either estrogen or progesterone. And I'm not sure which one it is because I'm not an expert on this. I just know that it replicates that hormone in your body. So your body doesn't naturally produce it. And so, whenever you put something in your body, like a drug that causes some sort of synthetic reaction to happen, a lot of things can go wrong. When I was growing up, a really popular form of birth control is called Yaz or Yasmin. And they found out it was causing blood clots in legs and, a lot of things to happen vascularly to the body because of the way that the hormones interacted with the body. And so that one was taken away. That one was taken off the market. And then, there's just been so many things with birth control similar to that over the years. And I believe that it is prescribed for a lot of different reasons that it shouldn't be. Like dermatologists, if you have bad skin and you're a woman, they put you on birth control because it does something and it makes your skin prettier or softer or whatever, because estrogen, is a beauty hormone in some spaces as well. So it is just prescribed a lot, and there are so many side effects, but it seems so common. Just pop a pill, and that's what everybody does, right? You take a pill once a day, you set an alarm on your phone, you just take it. But I'm not saying there aren't good reasons to take it as well. There are good reasons if you're not ready for a family or...
of course. But it's like you should know the other side of the coin.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
That's the thing, is so many people want to have these like sacred cows where like you're not allowed to criticize stuff. And it's like, you should be allowed to examine any subject from any angle.
Exactly.
And bring it up regardless of who you are. If you're a man, you're just a stupid guy, you've never even taken birth control, how can you talk about this stuff?
Right.
It's like, I mean...
Right.
Whatever. But one of the studies that was very interesting was they had a study where they were... talking about like pheromones and how women were able to smell the clothes of a man and like say if they were like compatible or not. I don't know the extent of the study, but I heard about it.
That's crazy.
It was really interesting where and it was weird. So what they would do is they would smell the clothes of a man, and then they would actually go on like a blind date with these men. Yeah. And they didn't know which clothes they smelled and which man they were with or whatever. And the weird thing was they were testing to see, okay, so smell the clothes. Do you think you're compatible with this guy or not? And they would say yes or no. And then they go on one or two or I don't know how many blind dates or whatever. And then by the end of the date, they would say, do you think you're compatible or not with this person? And then they'd say yes or no. And the crazy thing is the women that were not on birth control were like 80. I'm totally throwing the statistic out, but they were actually able to predict the likelihood of them being compatible with this person. Wow. On like some sort of predictable number, 70 or 80% or something, like actually higher. Kind of crazy. And the women that were on birth control, it was 50-50 right down the line. Wow. They could not decide one way or the other. And they could have, and even like they were saying some of them were really dead set, like, yeah, this is like totally yes. Yeah. And then they went on the date and it was totally no. Yeah. And so 50-50 obviously means it was random. Right, exactly. They had just as better of a chance of flipping a coin, but the women that were not on birth control somehow could actually sense that, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, it's suppressing and it's just causing things to happen in your body that, could change those kinds of outcomes. Yeah. So
very fascinating. Yeah. But anyways, sorry, another rabbit hole.
No, it's okay. It's okay. These are all good. These are all good to be explored.
Yes. So you started dating Nick, and then it was long distance, and somehow you made your way down here after you graduated, right?
Yes, I graduated from UC in 2016, and the day after graduation, I moved down to Marietta with my cat. And Nick and I have lived together ever since. But then the third prong on my journey to healing and health was, of course, here it comes, yoga. Yes. Yeah, so that's all of that struggle led me to yoga. And I went to yoga at the studio called Vita Prana. It's in Smyrna. Well, it was in Smyrna. It just closed down last month. Sad.
Oh, that's sad.
Very sad. But they were very close to the first apartment that we lived in. And, it was another kind of rough patch because I graduated from college and then the next day I moved down here where the only person I knew was Nick.
Yeah.
And so by no means was it as hard as the first story that I told, but it was still a hard journey for me.
Yeah,
so,
no friends.
Yeah, and so one thing that Nick and I talked about a lot was, well, one good way to make friends is to go to yoga studios, because yoga studios, they have what we call tribes, where they're dedicated people who always go to these studios that you can make friends with. You'll always see them there. You'll see them at workshops and all of that. And so I went to Vita Prana because it was very close, and it was another one of those moments where on the chalkboard behind the front desk, it said, join our yoga teacher training from this month to this month of this coming year. And it was one of those moments where I jumped and I didn't look. I just emailed and I sent in my application that night.
Had you ever been interested in yoga before?
Yeah. So in college, I took some yoga classes because we needed some physical fitness things in our curriculum. So I took it freshman year and senior year. I'd been to studios throughout college because they give special college deals to college students. So, I loved yoga. I was a cheerleader, so I was flexible. I liked yoga, but I didn't really understand it as much. And I think a lot of people, when they go into teacher training, they are that way as well. So in yoga, there's something called the 8 limbs of yoga. I don't know if you've heard this before. So there are 8 limbs of yoga, and only one of those limbs is the physical practice.
Huh.
So the other ones, and I won't go through all of them, are what you can do for the world, what you can do for yourself, meditation, breath work, calming of the senses and listening to yourself, and then eventually bliss. And I didn't go through all 8 of them, but yoga is such a bigger picture than just the physical practice of it. The physical practice is what draws most people in the modern world, but what keeps a yogi and makes a true yogi is when they understand everything else. And so I was drawn in by the physical practice because I did have at this point, a strong body. I was flexible, which I thought was so necessary to be a yoga instructor. But I started the yoga teacher training and I realized, wow, this is so much deeper than I could have ever realized. So it was a really beautiful journey, and it was 6 months of classroom. I think it was 2 or 3 weekends a month where we'd be there all day long, and we would study yoga. We would learn the positions, the asanas as we call them, but most importantly, we learned the philosophy of yoga, the chakras, mudras, mantras, chanting, Sanskrit, all of it. And it was a beautiful journey. And that was kind of the last healing piece that I needed.
That's awesome.
Because whenever you're sick or whenever there's something going on, we're alone, we tend to be in our heads all the time. Just loud chatter that never really stops. Just, loudness and negativity as well.
Definitely.
And so when I was doing my yoga practices before then, I found it hard to do Savasana. And because I would just be so frustrated. I was like, I can't meditate. I'm so bad at it. It's this sucks. This is terrible. But through yoga school, I learned, to kind of take it as a process, and it eventually came. But
that's really cool.
Yeah.
One thing that I had a kind of a little realization of this past weekend, because I always thought it was kind of weird that yoga, they always, yoga instructors, they always will say, the Sanskrit names of the positions and stuff like that, the poses. And I always thought that was, kind of weird. But one thing that was really cool, so I was at this, resort in Mexico this weekend, and they had, yoga classes in the mornings. And I went to a couple of them.
Were they on the beach?
They were not on the beach, unfortunately.
That'd be so cool.
The beach was kind of rocky.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't conducive for that.
Yeah.
But it was on the grass. It was beautiful. And it was a pretty basic class because there was a lot of people that were very inexperienced, blah, blah, blah. But the cool thing is even though the yoga instructors were not speaking the best English because it was in Mexico, they were kind of broken accent, blah, blah, blah. I have gone to enough yoga classes where I know the Sanskrit names. So when they would say them, I was like, oh, I know this pose.
Exactly.
Even though I didn't necessarily understand what they were trying to say in English or whatever.
The language of yoga is universal. So that's the beautiful thing about Sanskrit. So you could travel to a place in Mexico or Germany or, somewhere else in the world. And if they teach in Sanskrit, you're going to know what they're saying.
Yeah. And that was the interesting thing. I was an au pair in Italy.
Yeah.
And
cool.
one of the things like the family, they went to like a Catholic church, and they were like, okay, you're not Catholic, so like, it might be kind of weird for you. And I'm like, I've been to some Catholic churches before, we'll be fine. But when I went there, I like hadn't made the mental connection that it was all going to be in Italian, and I don't really speak Italian.
Oh, yeah.
So I was just thinking like, oh yeah, it'll be kind of weird because it's Catholic. But then I was like, not only do I not understand like because there's like in Catholic mass and stuff, there's a lot of like reciting stuff and all that.
Yeah.
Not only was it
Catholic.
that I didn't know that stuff, it was also in Italian. So I'm like super lost.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay. But the thing was, it was weird. Is like, whoa, it's weird that there's people that would like worship the same thing that like my family would, but they're speaking a totally different language. It's just, it almost seems like a totally different thing.
Right.
But like with yoga, it's like kind of universal.
It's
kind of very, I never like thought about it that way, but I made that connection like this weekend.
Yeah, we actually talked about that a lot in our training, because some people were a little more reluctant to learn the Sanskrit because it's hard. It's harder to remember. Like,
and it almost seems kind of like cult-like or something at first.
Parvottanasana. Like if you look at some of the words in my Bada Supta Kanasana, like I had to learn all of these from my practicum. But if you look at some of those words in there, they are
really long,
really, really long. You're like, how am I even going to ever say this? But the important thing to know is, again, if you're teaching to a foreign person, or if you ever go to India, which is the home of yoga, you're going to have to speak that if someone's going to understand you.
Yeah.
But the yoga teacher training was beautiful. It was transformative. But to kind of wrap this all up into a nice, pretty package, I feel like because of the journey that I had and all the hardships that I went through during college and even moving down here, I carried that through, that compassion, that understanding through into my yoga practice a lot. Because when I would take some yoga classes when I was going through my hard times, some of the instructors weren't so sensitive. They would say things that wouldn't resonate well. They wouldn't necessarily work on grounding as much. Or they would try and push me harder than my body was ready for. And so I felt like defeated afterwards, like I wasn't good enough. So I kind of got a unique perspective during that hard time on maybe someone walking into my class is going through what I was going through. And so
that's really important.
Yeah, and so you need to know how to communicate to somebody like that. You can't push them. You can't, expect them to be in the same mental space that you are. You kind of have to be sensitive, and you might never know if they are going through anything. But you have to just, of course, carry that with you, that this person could be suffering right now, just absolutely at their lowest point, and I don't want to take them lower. I want to make sure to stabilize them or take them higher. I want them to feel loved. I want them to love their body again. I want them to, walk out of here feeling accomplished. And even if it's just like 1 degree higher than they were when they came in, then I've done my job.
That's awesome.
So carrying that compassion through into my practice or into my teaching is something that I'm very intentional about. Because some people come in and I see that they're frustrated or, they're carrying something onto the mat. I want to make sure that whatever it is, I clear their head and let them know that they're loved. Ooh, I touched my mic.
It's okay.
That's something that is very important to me as a teacher.
That's really awesome. Because I think that it's really important to be a student first and realize, it's kind of cliche. Everyone says like, oh, you can learn something from everybody. But sometimes it's like, well, that guy's stupid. I don't agree with anything he said. But you always can learn what you don't like.
Exactly.
And you always can learn what you see and you're like, oh, I definitely don't want to do that.
Right.
And that's really important, for podcasting. Like, listening to bad podcasts actually kind of helps me.
Yeah, like we were talking about with the sound. I stopped listening to one of the podcasts because one of the girls, she didn't know how to talk into her mic correctly. And so she would scream every time she did, and so I had to turn it off.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's fascinating because, there's a lot of people that get into podcasting that don't even listen to podcasts.
Wow.
And so they don't really know what people even want to hear. And I'm going to be actually creating a lot of content around this very soon about pitfalls and mistakes that people make when they're podcasting, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, it's a radio show. So they make it real cheesy and annoying like a radio show would be.
Oh, that's annoying.
And very talk showy and very not natural kind
scripted.
of. Yeah, very scripted. And there's nothing
natural.
necessarily wrong with a script if it's an informational type podcast.
Yeah, or if there's things that you want to make sure get out or come out
exactly.
during the podcast.
There's nothing.
Sure.
But I'm more of the approach of if the host is good, he should be able to kind of guide through, he or she should be able to kind of guide the conversation or guide the thing regardless of what the script is. I don't know.
No, that's very true.
And that might be kind of a whatever. You can take that however you want. But it's interesting that you said that you heard things that you didn't like in other yoga classes and you make sure you're mindful of that now.
Yeah, it made me feel a certain way, and it made me not want to go back to that yoga studio, that teacher in general, and like just skip yoga for a while. And that's never the goal. Yoga heals and helps so many people in different ways. And so you just want to make sure that you love them. You meet them where they're at. Because, some people could be their first yoga class. It could be their very first introduction to it. And if they don't have a good experience, what are the chances that they're going to come back or try yoga again ever?
Yep.
So
exactly.
I just want to make sure I provide a good experience for everybody because, again, yoga is so much more than just, the physical practice.
Yeah.
We say it's not a workout, it's a work in. So it's not like I've had people ask me if they can do squats during my class. And I'm like, sure, but that's not really the point here. The point is for an hour or 75 minutes to get out of your head and focus on the sensations in your body. So focus on how it feels to breathe deeply and know how lucky you are to have that breath and to feel your heart beating, to, just focus in for a second and feel that subtle pounding in your chest. Have you ever really thought about what that means? And like to know that it's going to happen and just focusing on your pulse and different sensations that pop up. Even that is just such a calming thing. And whenever I start to get stressed out, that's what I listen for. I listen for my heartbeat and I immediately am like, oh, this problem that I had, that doesn't matter anymore. That doesn't mean anything.
That's really super important because a lot of people don't even think about it.
Exactly. So my practice, we use the physical practice to kind of get you out of your head a little bit. And so that's why when I have people hold poses for a while, I talk through it, which might be super annoying, but I don't want people to drift down this stream of consciousness.
Yeah. That's always helpful for me, at least when I'm in a class. Like I like it when the teacher is saying things in the pose that are like helpful to like, be mindful of this. Oh, be mindful of this. Be mindful of this, or whatever. Because chances are, like, I could improve it, or I could go farther, or whatever.
Exactly. Or I don't want my thought space to go out of this room. Because during my practice, if somebody doesn't talk sometimes, or if I'm taking a class and somebody isn't explaining something, I can start thinking about my to-do list, or things that I have to do afterwards. But that's really not the point. I'm in this moment. I want to enjoy it. I want to, make the most of it.
Definitely.
So, also cheesy, but
Hey, cheesy things are like repeated for a reason, though.
I know, I agree. But I just sound like that cliche yoga instructor.
I feel like you don't sound that cliche.
I hope not.
You could have said a lot more cliche things.
Yes.
But I unfortunately kind of have to wrap things up.
I know, we went very long.
No, we actually, trust me, I've had way longer podcasts. But if there is any like closing message or anything that you want to say to people or plug any social media or how can people reach you or anything else that you want to say before we sign off? Sure.
I'll say a couple of those things then. Obviously, we touched on a lot of very sensitive things that happened in my life, and it could be something that you personally are experiencing. But again, I just want to reiterate that things do get better. You will get through it. You will come out on the other side. And it might not happen in a year or 5 years or in any time that you expect, but it will happen. So just know that healing is a process, whether it's a physical healing or an emotional, mental healing, you will be okay. But don't do it alone because like most things in this life, we don't do it alone. So ask for help. Even if you don't get it from the person you're expecting it from, get help from somebody. And if you ever need an outlet or if you don't know what to do, again, reach out to me. My name is Rachel Woods, and that's the same on my Instagram. It's my name, Rachel Woods, but the Woods has 5 O's in it. So you can direct message me, or you can get my phone number from Andrew, and I'm happy to help you on your journey in any way that I can. Or come take my aerial yoga class. That
Very
helps
nice.
Too. And something that I like about one of the podcasts that I listen to, and I'll plug it really quick. It's called That's So Retrograde. It's a fun little podcast done by 2 women in LA where they talk about different things like tarot cards and crystals and colonics and juice cleanses and all those kinds of things. At the end of their podcast, they both do a roses and a thorn where they talk about their rose and their thorn for the week. So they're highs and lows essentially. So for this week specifically, what was your rose and what was your thorn?
Ooh, well, I was on vacation this week, so my rose was definitely like taking time away. Originally, I went into that vacation like kind of not annoyed, but it was a family vacation, so I was like, I actually want to get work done while I'm having my downtime, and I actually got to relax a lot, which was nice. I decided like, okay, I'm going to chill a little bit more, and I did put out a podcast, so that was kind of cool that I was able to still do that, but
you recorded it in Mexico?
I didn't record it, but I like recorded the intro and the outro and like put it out into the world in Mexico. I'd already recorded it back here.
Got it. Okay.
But I like did all the stuff in Mexico. Just kind of
real podcaster. That's cool.
Yeah. And my thorn, was probably, that's hard. I would, because I was on vacation, it was kind of like, it was kind of like a hunky-dory sort of week. I guess my thorn would be a little bit of maybe having arguments with my family. Yeah. And not, because I was with my family, tensions can be a little bit high when you're traveling.
It's just your family. Those things happen.
Yeah. But, sometimes I was probably more of a jerk than I needed to be. Yeah. And so that was probably my thorn.
At least you realize that and you're not blaming it on them. Like, oh, they're the ones who suck. When you're like, oh, you know what? I probably was a little bit on edge. Took that a little too far. So that's
chances are most of the time when you feel like someone else is being a jerk, it's probably like a reaction to something you're doing. That might be kind of jerky as well.
That's very, very sage advice. Very good thing to say.
What was your rose and thorn?
So I'll start with my thorn. I had a little bit of food poisoning this week.
That sucks.
Yeah, that definitely stinks. So I went to this restaurant before I went to a yoga workshop, and I had this salmon, and I love salmon.
Me too.
And it was so good, but I started noticing during the workshop my belly started hurting, and I was like, oh, just maybe I just ate too fast or too close to this workshop and wasn't feeling so good for the rest of the night and the next night even. But my rose is actually that workshop that I went to. They say once you're a yoga teacher, like once a teacher, always a student. And sometimes that gets lost because I have a busy life. But my favorite parts of my week are when I can go to a yoga class or a yoga workshop, especially somewhere new, and I can just completely let go, not teach for once, and let them teach me. And so I'll plug them as well. I went to Tough Love Yoga. It's on Decatur. It's kind of downtown. And I did a chakra and cello healing workshop where they had a live cellist playing the entire time. It was a 2-hour workshop, and the instructor, Jen, led us through an entire chakra healing. And it was beautiful. I felt like I was floating after I came out of there. And then that night I felt like I was puking because I was, but the workshop itself was wonderful. So if you ever want to go to a good workshop in Atlanta, go to Tough Love Yoga. And I guess I should plug, I work at Sky Gym Atlanta in Sandy Springs, where they also do circus arts like trapeze, silk, lyra. They do a little bit of advanced flexibility classes. I teach aerial yoga there. So
very fun. Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I will make sure to plug all of your stuff in the show notes as well, so people can click them easily. But
great.
But yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. This was so fun.
Yeah, it really was fun.
It was good to share my story, and hopefully I'll help reach some people when they need it. So
I'm sure a lot of people definitely were needing that.
We definitely touched some tough topics, but thank you for doing that so gracefully, because I don't think you expected any of that.
No, but I'm cool with it. Like, I like that kind of stuff, because sometimes podcasts are too dry. Like, they can be very like, okay, this is an interview and I'm promoting my business. And I'm like, I want to get to know you, though, you know, a little bit more.
Let's talk about the dirt. Exactly. Let's get through that. So
very nice.
Thank you for letting me use this as an outlet for that story.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, Rachel, thanks for being on the show. And we'll talk to you later, everybody.
See you guys.
Wow. What a powerful story. I mean, come on. I want to thank Rachel again for being on the show, being so vulnerable with us. I can't stress enough how important these types of conversations are, especially in today's social climate. And of course, I want to thank you all for listening all the way until the end. You guys are the reason why I spend so much time and energy making this show. And it's episodes like this that, really keep me going. I mean, if you think about it, this type of content wouldn't really exist like 10 years ago. Like where else would thousands of people have access to listen to a long conversation like that? Like it just didn't exist. And podcasts are so important. And the more I think about it, the more I know that we're changing the world, and hopefully it's changing for the better. At least I think so. So like I said, you made it to the end. Again, thank you. That means a lot to me. But most importantly, it probably means that you enjoyed this episode and you probably got a lot out of it. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would highly recommend that you go back and listen to episode 54 entitled Yoga Saved My Life with my friend Abigail Holtz. And she's a world traveler and a yoga instructor as well. She is dedicated to bringing Ashtanga yoga to those struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. And just like Rachel, Abby has gone through a lot of, I guess you could say, trials and tribulations, drug and alcohol abuse, not the most ideal home life growing up, and just in general, some things that most people would not really be envious of going through. But I believe, and I think Abby also believes, that those experiences shaped her into a very strong person who's able to use those experiences to help other people. And now she's doing really important work with the Trini Foundation. And again, Abby shared really vulnerable stuff on that episode, some things that I'm sure a lot of you guys would be scared to share. And again, I'm so glad to have a platform to share that kind of stuff. So again, go check out episode 54. It's called Yoga Saved My Life. Another episode I think you might like would be episode 27 with none other than Rachel's boyfriend, Nick Shelby. And Nick is a chiropractic student at Life University, and he's extremely passionate about health and wellness and human optimization. And Nick and I have known each other for a few years. He's always been extremely vocal about controversial health topics, such as chiropractic and vaccines. And I had recently seen a lot of contrasting information out there about this kind of stuff. So, of course, we covered a lot of the ideas about health that are being spread around and examined why they may or may not be true. And Nick is extremely well-versed in his fields of study. I learned a lot during this episode, so if any of that interests you, you should definitely go check out episode 27 called Optimize Your Body with Nick Shelby. All right. So you've got some other podcasts to listen to for the next couple of days. But coming up next is episode 73 with Chris Arnold. Chris is a badass, man. He is an MMA fighter and a personal trainer and a freaking ninja. And we got into his story, how he became a fighter, joining the Navy, and his training and fighting styles. And that was a really fun episode. Should be coming out in a few days. So don't miss out. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to go to iTunes and rate 5 stars and leave me a little review in there. If you're on an iPhone, chances are you're probably listening to this on the Apple Podcasts app. Same thing. Just go in there and rate me 5 stars. That would really, really, really help me out. And just leaving a little review saying that you liked this episode or something that you didn't like, or leaving some criticism or whatever. I read all of those reviews. There's only like 50 something in there, and this is episode 72. So going into iTunes and the Apple Podcasts app and rating is really helpful for me, and it also helps me get the podcast out to more people. So please just take a couple minutes and go rate in there. That helps me out. Also, just sharing the podcast with your friends, talking about podcasts. Oh, cool. Yeah. What podcast are you listening to? Just mention my name. That would be really helpful. If you genuinely enjoyed the episode, I would really appreciate you sharing it with other people. That's how this kind of thing grows. So please share it with your friends. Also, you can follow me on social media. Go to my website, andrewdeitch.com. You can find the links to all that stuff there. But again, thank you all so much for making it to the end. My name's Andrew Deitch, and I love you all so much. You keep inspiring me to do what I do. And I hope that these episodes bring you value, entertainment, and hopefully inspire you guys to do awesome stuff. That's all I got. And I will catch up with you guys on the next episode. See you later, everyone. Thanks
Pars vote Tanasana. Like if you look at some of the words in my, Bada Supta Kanasana, like